Good evening, dear listeners, and we have wonderful news for you tonight. Coors invites you to take advantage of an extra special deal for your spring cleaning. Should you find any mysterious wisp of fog around your house or garden, don't lean in, don't close your eyes, do not listen to their dark murmurs, and do not give in to their sweet, sweet temptations. Just call this toll-free number right now and your trustworthy, loving, friendly neighborhood cleaners or your best friends will come to take care of it for you. My name is Lavanya.
I'm Astro.
And I'm Xaviul.
This is a Blackout Club show for Blackout Club players with minimal speculation, all lore, and a focus on the known facts. Our topic of the day is Fragment stories.
Our spoiler warning for today is a reminder, first of all, as always, that the Dreaming Prophet is not spoiler-free. We are delving into the lore, so we are looking to spoil you thoroughly on a number of different topics. But in specific, if you are planning on hunting the idea down in the game and forcing him to recollect his traumatizing past memories, this is not the episode for you because we're going to be explaining all of that for you. In terms of content warning, because we are dealing with the idea, we have a warning for death, for genocide, for suicide, and substance abuse, specifically of alcohol. So keep that in mind as you listen.
And joining us today, we have a special guest. It's the one, the only Spoder.
Hello. Hey, yeah, I'm Spoder. I've been doing some of the Discord posts for the Dreaming Prophet, and I also really like shark facts.
So let's begin by discussing what are fragments. We've discussed fragments before on the show. If you want more on that, check out episode 5, A Light in the Darkness.
So, from what we understand, fragments are a method of self-preservation employed by the idea through his host. Most, if not all, of the fragments on the map are remnants from the Coal, which is a period of time in which SAO's loyal, absolutely not terrible, followers hunted and killed the idea's followers throughout Redacre. This is what we sometimes refer to as a genocide. This time period extended from prior to the start of the game until shortly before the start of early access. Where host was killed, a piece of the idea is left behind in that place. He has referred to these as, quote, pictures, glimpses of those lives, end quote. He has also compared them to snapshots.
Fragments can be collected by shining a flashlight and closing your eyes when you see a weird patch of smoke. When collected, a bright silhouette, kind of like the shape, will appear.
The silhouette is part of the idea's name in the Old Tongue. For newer listeners, the Old Tongue is the Eldritch language that the demons are made up of.
When talking about the collection method, the idea said, quote, I was born of contradiction, eyes blind, light burning, end quote.
Finding fragments opens a door for the idea to talk to players.
To try to close this door again, Speak as One followers can ask SAO to burn fragments from them.
Because why would you want to keep them? Speak as One has noted that the idea's fragments are so tied to choice that in order to purge them from a player, that a player must offer them up willingly. So remember that next time you see a fragment and you have a light of rebellion, all it takes is a word, but Speak as One can't help you if you won't help yourself.
As you can see, this is a role-play opportunity only, and it won't affect in-game fragment collection mechanics for them or anybody else.
Are you saying I'm not a cultist in real life? I'm shattered. My immersion is broken.
Hey, I don't know what you do on your off days.
The rules behind the creation of fragments are still sort of unclear. We've gained some information, but we don't know the full process. This will be discussed later in the episode. For now, this is what we know.
Fragment stories are what we get when players ask the idea about its previous hosts.
This was a pretty common pastime for a lot of players with the idea in early access.
Not a lot of plot moving happened in early access, likely out of necessity. Making games is hard work. However, God encounters still happened, mostly to build foundational knowledge among players.
Sometimes stories came as hints to help players find a fragment. Other times they were told after players had found a fragment and they just wanted to know who it was in their story. We don't know whether fragment stories were ever intended to be part of the Blackout Club and its lore, and we may never know.
That's okay. Ultimately, it doesn't matter. They're here now, they exist, and we can tell and retell them. Regardless of how they started or why, they provide a fun and unique method of making the story seem more real and poignant, and elevate risks for players.
It's one thing to say these fragments were once people, and it's a whole nother thing to assign them names, give them personalities, and talk about who they are. It allows the players to build a connection with the fragments and to feel more sympathy for them.
As for risks, making them seem more like players tends to make you wonder if you could become one too.
The first fragment story is Elisa, a fragment from The Arches.
The idea describes her as a child, then says she had just reached hosting age, and clarified barely older than you to a player character. At the time, she was solely hosting the idea, and he had described her as a musician, saying that she had perfect pitch.
This means she can think of a note and sing it without any help or reference. A lot of musicians have this, but not all of them do, and it is not necessary to be a successful musician, it just really helps.
She was brought in to help tune the instrument. The idea says she worked on the instrument when it was much smaller.
Given the size of the instrument now, this could have been a very long time ago.
Most of the idea's current knowledge nowadays about the instrument still comes from Elisa.
Next up, we have Swanson, who was in the barracks. She was a caretaker in the barracks, and the barracks itself was made to house homeless people who work for Chorus, mostly on the instrument.
Now, we could all have a long, tedious, 30-minute long discussion on whether or not Speak as One is a moral, upright character. They are not, but I would love to have it. But we have to all get together and admit here, Speak as One is helping the homeless. They are feeding and housing the homeless, and they are giving them valuable career skills through forcibly employing them in a dungeon, which they can never leave and in which they will never again see daylight. That's doing something for their community. What is your daemon doing for the community?
Putting rotten eggs in your backyard.
That's not helping. Those don't fertilize. You have to nitrogen fix the yard afterwards. That's not helpful.
Swanson was a transgender woman. She transitioned during her tenure there. Chorus supported her transition.
She used her position as a caretaker to try to recruit the idea followers.
Speaking of, our next fragment is the barracks bunk fragment, Utius. He was one of the homeless people in the barracks who probably was recruited, but he was an amnesiac who couldn't even remember his own name. The idea actually gave him the name Utius, which comes from Homer's The Odyssey. When the Cyclops asks for Odysseus' names, he says Utius, which means no one. So when Odysseus attacks the Cyclops and the Cyclops cries out, the Cyclops says, Utius, no one, is hurting me.
Whether or not the idea specifically knew this is unclear, but if he didn't, it seems like an intentional reference out of character. He had stolen supplies for the idea and then progressed to stealing medical alcohol and implied to have a substance abuse problem.
Look, if I was living in that fucking dungeon of a barracks, I too would want to drink.
The next fragment is Graham, who's located in the 1001 bathtub.
Graham is described as quiet. The idea said he was subtler, so he lasted longer in the coal.
And Grim is also our friendly reminder that Speak as One and the Lucids are all more than a little bit fucked up. Speak as One's people forced him to bathe and made him bleed out, faking a suicide in the bathtub. The idea said, quote, he would have never have joined him, end quote, the meaning of which is unclear. Would he not have joined the cult? Would he not have joined Speak as One? Would he not have joined their bowling team? Maybe they gave him a pamphlet before they killed him. We don't know, and the only people that would know, we really don't want to ask.
The next fragment is Joel, who we can find at the 919 wardrobe.
Joel was described as an adult, and the idea said that he had run an amateur radio station.
He described this type of radio as short-range radio. This type of radio transmission only reaches a few hundred meters, but because they're so weak, they don't cause a lot of interference with other radio equipment and don't require a license to use. RFID, Wi-Fi, and Bluetooth also operate on these frequencies, just to give you an idea. He was most likely using Citizens Band Radio, or CB radio. CB radio has a box as the receiver and a telegraph-like mouthpiece to speak into. Anyone using this kind of radio would need to take turns talking, using a push-to-talk button. It used to be really popular, which made it very busy, which in turn deterred more people from using it, so in modern times it's fallen out of fashion. That means it's a great option for subtle communications, because it might take Chorus a bit to figure out what to monitor.
He's described as, quote, so very lonely, end quote. The idea said he had made friends through his radio work.
Unfortunately, one of those friends turned out to be a part of Course. That friend tricked him into betraying the rest of their friends and ultimately led to his demise, because Course is basically the worst.
After telling the story, the idea refused to talk more about the radio tech, out of fear it would put the players in danger.
The next fragment story is Zack Beat, who's located in the Nerve Center upper alcove.
The idea called him, quote, young Zachary, end quote. He was possibly a teenager or maybe a young adult. One of, the youths.
The idea stated, quote, he had a condition, flush-faced, end quote. Unfortunately, the idea also has a condition which is a deadly allergy to full sentences. This could mean a number of things. It could be keratosis pilaris, which is a harmless skin condition. It could be lupus, which is an autoimmune disorder. Or it could just be that he was exceptionally pale and his skin hated the cruel touch of the sun. Who knows? But it probably wasn't the last, just because since when have any of the kids in the Blackout Club gone out in the daytime?
He tried to destroy the instrument on his own. Foolish. The idea warned him that it would take more than one person. Zack didn't listen. According to the idea, he kept repeating bolt cutters and brass balls.
The idea sure knows how to pick 'em, but I guess any port in a storm.
Whatever damage he was able to cause, it would have been repaired quickly. Speak as one has many well-coordinated hosts. The idea described repairs as, quote, near immediate, end quote.
Next up on the host chopping block is Dane. His fragment can be found in String Relay B. The idea mentioned he had attention problems, possibly ADHD. He was also described as athletic, and Dane was sent by the idea.
Supposedly, according to the idea, it was to do surveillance on a courtist. But, as we all know, he got caught. And the idea lost contact with him until he was shown the fragment. The placement of the fragment is on a ledge overlooking one of the two terminals in String Relay B.
Next up, we have the Thin Man. His fragment can be found in the 921 bedroom. This fragment is in the bedroom currently occupied by Gwen, the club leader. Before her, there were previous occupants of the house, whose name we do not know. The idea says this fragment was an adult, quote, a rail thin man, end quote.
We don't know much about him right now, not even his name, but we do know that apparently Gwen had to rest with the fact that somebody was murdered right underneath her bed.
Do you think she ever, turned her lamp on, looked over to the right side of her bed, and just saw a fragment?
The next fragment is Paul, who can be found outside the house 921.
Paul was described as a child, and the idea said he had lost his father.
His father wasn't dead, but something happened to the father's mind. The something is unclear. Maybe he was too saturated, or maybe he had an illness.
The idea thinks Paul saw him as a substitute father figure as a result. Who could ever understand why? Paul wanted to find out more about the idea and tried to break into 921, the home of our previous host, to do so.
He may have been searching for a fragment. Whether or not he was searching for the Thin Man's fragment, we can't be sure because the timing, as always, is super fuzzy.
The idea says that Speak as One's people were already inside. Whether that means they knew Paul would break in or were simply residents who knew what to do is never clarified. They caught him and presumably he died.
The next on the fragment hit list is Elkins in the old growth shed.
An adult, probably on the older side, who the idea called stooped, possibly had a hunchback. The idea added he had mutton chops and was also tired. The idea describes him as, quote, a holdout who survived to the end of the coal, end quote.
Whether that means he survived past the end or whether he was one of the last of the coal is unclear, but a difference like that is meaning the idea doesn't care, so why should we?
He was the old growth's groundkeeper. He, quote, buried his lighter for the idea, end quote. Potentially as a ritual act. Maybe just to save it, maybe as a sign he was quitting smoking. Who knows? The idea regrets being unable to answer his prayers.
Elkins wrote songs about the idea returning to Redacre. The idea says that Elkins wouldn't have known about the idea as he was. At the end of the coal, few hosts were left, scattered, and most were advised to leave Redacre entirely. Whether or not they did, but they certainly weren't talking to each other. Without those others to talk to, Elkins was probably most familiar with old the idea's simple core sentiment, to resist.
And last but not least, we have number one man himself, top of Speakers One's hit list, Colm Ryan of the 922 Upstairs Room. He was Siobhan's brother, who came to Redacre as part of a plan to give Nayeli and Siobhan a baby related to both parents. He was a key player in the Witness plot,
which we talk about more in the episode 11, The Midnight Report.
From what we understand, the day before Chase the Sun's symbol was broken, Colm went out for a jog. The Measure Cuts describes what Gwen saw.
Quote, he seemed angry, pushed himself to the point of collapsing. Then just as he passed that sad old deer statue, he did fall, face down. He remained there gazing into a puddle for several minutes. When he rose, he did not seem tired or angry. He returned home with a confident stride, end quote.
Can we just talk about how the deer statue is only one house down from his house?
Can we talk about the fact TMC went out of his way to shit talk it and call it sad and old? What the fuck did it ever do to you, man?
Can we talk about how he gazed into the puddle for 7 minutes? What a narcissist.
Although the exact meaning of this hasn't been confirmed, we can intuit a couple things. One, the mention of gazing into a puddle means, potentially, the puddle as a reflective surface could be used the same way as our boxcar mirror, as a method of contacting the gods.
And second, when discussing Colm's fragment, the Idare says that when he first reached out to Colm, the symbol wasn't broken yet. The Idare also specifically mentions how angry Colm was. These two factors line up alarmingly well.
Prior to hosting the Idare, Colm hosted Chase the Sun, and he was her only host in Redacre. It's possible that her agent, the Hunter, simply never left before the Idare arrived.
However, it's worth noting that the Idare couldn't remember why he reached out to Colm. Was it because of his anger alone, his need to rebel against what he was told? Who knows? Speaking of, what was he told? How much did he know about Chorus, and what did they want with his sister's child?
It's also worth noting that Colm Ryan did not die. The voice came to collect him in person, which is extremely rare according to the Watchers, and they did not kill him. Speakers One's Watchers say they took him into custody and even claimed that they still have him in their care. Yet, he left a fragment.
The Idare theorizes that to leave that fragment, Colm must have thought he died.
Speakers One clarified that fear of death alone couldn't leave a fragment, or else there'd probably be a lot more child-sized fragments all over Redacre. They say many of the Idare's hosts were afraid, but did not leave fragments simply because of that.
We don't know what this means about Colm, about fragments, or about the potential fates of the other fallen hosts. If you have ideas, or if you're interested in learning more, just remember to send prayers, ask questions, and of course, share your theories.
Question has released new DLC packs for the Blackout Club. You can choose a god and put on their shirt, jacket, or decorate your boxcar to show off your choice. Each one costs $4.99, and that money goes to support the team.
Make sure to buy the Laugh Last DLC pack, because he could really use encouragement to pay for his therapy for fear of sharks.
We now have a website, and links to all of our guides and resources on it. This includes the newbie guide, the Lorepedia, the player terms lexicon, and more. You can find that at tinyurl.com/thedreamingprophet. Cal, Archivalian Skigulium, has made a lore master doc. This is updated every Monday or so with all of the latest lore with the help of the Dreaming Prophet, mostly lavanya because they're amazing. You can find that at tinyurl.com/tbcloreguidev2. And as always, there's an official interaction archive on the Discord. This archives both God Talks and personal dreams. If you have transcripts or videos, please add them to the archive. There's also an option to allow your encounter to be used to support the wiki, which is heavily encouraged. Join the Discord to get involved at discord.gg/theblackoutclub. The Blackout Club is made by Question Games. Our transcript and video is by Lavanya. Audio editing is by me, Astro. Our publicity and guest is Spoderman. Xaviul is an intrepid reporter, hot on the trail of Nunya,